She was on her way up, I called her and I told her to go. Because you said that the other team is going. So I'm not calling on her. Okay. No, I'm sure they're going to come after us, so I will see. Okay, no problem.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the United National Congress, the Loyal Opposition, the press conference which we traditionally hold during the week and to be followed shortly thereafter by the Sunday pressers. On behalf of the Leader of the Opposition, Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa, Senior Counsel, on behalf of all members of the opposition, it is our pleasure, of course, to join you today, Friday, and we are in a very ticklish situation in our country right now, whereby we are seeing that our democratic rights and principles, traditions, norms, conventions, they are all being eroded at this point in time. I am joined, of course, this morning by my esteemed colleague, Member of Parliament for Natarima, Mr. Rodney Charles. He is, of course, the shadow MP for National Security and Foreign Affairs. And I say welcome to MP Rodney Charles. We are, of course, going to embark upon certain matters which are presently engaging the public's attention. Myself, MP for Chaguanas West, Dinesh Rambally, also shadow MP for the Attorney General and National Security. And so within our respective realms in terms of shadowing certain portfolios, we are going to treat with matters. Our press conference today is titled The PNM's Political Persecution of Members of the Tobago House of Assembly. I repeat that, the PNM's Political Persecution of Members of the Tobago House of Assembly. And we say no more at this point in time. I just point out that we will have the Express, you will see this headline, War on Farley. And also you will also see here, this never can be hidden from the headlines. And that is, of course, where you see a murder toll, 2023, 318. 318 as of today's date, today being 21st July 2023. And this time last year, 2022, the murder toll was 304. So that is just the Express. You will see that the Newsday carries also a headline, Prime Minister fires back at Farley. We will get into that. And when we look at the Trinidad Guardian, again, I want to point out to you that the Trinidad Guardian, of course, look at this headline, Prime Minister goes after Farley. And you will see that just on the inside, you also have murder count 320. So sometimes you see some little disparities with the figures. One newspaper is saying 321, is saying 318. Whichever one you choose to use as the official count, we are far in excess of the murder count of last year. So today, MP Rodney Charles will, of course, be taking down the pathway of the police service, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. He will, of course, be dealing with matters of crime and other issues in national security. And I propose, of course, to deal with matters treating with and concerning the Tobago House of Assembly. So without further ado, I welcome each and every one of you. This is a very critical press conference. We thank you all for joining us. We have members of the media here. I would like to hand over now to MP Rodney Charles, my esteemed colleague.
Thank you very much. My also esteemed colleague, MP Dinesh Rambally. someone I respect immensely, and someone who makes a significant contribution to the opposition and our task of presenting ourselves as the alternative government. Today we'll be talking about something that is critical, we think, for democracy and for our development as a country as we move forward. And my colleague referred to newspaper articles, and I was just reading one which says Prime Minister fires back at Farley and he calls for a police probe into bribery claims. And you want to ask a question, is he asking or is he instructing the police to act in a particular way? These days we are not careful, but sometimes you give a hint, and the TTPS may see that as a directive and an instruction. Only time will tell us. Today I want to focus on the TTPS, and I want to tell the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that it must not allow itself to be used by this Rowley-led PNM to become its personal attack dog. And we want to make a distinction between the PNM and this Rowley-led PNM that is taking us down a road of raging bull, animosity and anger and threats to our democracy. I want to tell senior officials of the TTPS that they must take immediate steps to preserve an arm's length relationship between them and the PNM. They must never become, and more so never be seen to be, attack pit bulls of this Keith Rowley administration. Now I want to say that I know senior officers of the TTPS. As far as I know, they are all professional officers. They would like to do all in their power to reduce crime. And my colleague referred to the murder rate. They would like to do all in their power to reduce crime. They hold meetings with citizens to advise on safe measures to protect against home invasions. They would hope that our borders are locked down to limit gun replacements for those they take off the streets. They would sincerely desire to protect the elderly, and I'm 75 years old, to protect the elderly as they go to banks to collect their pensions. They attempt to take steps to reduce car thefts, hijackings, and human trafficking. Many senior officers would like to be part of an esteemed, respected profession, recognized for leaving no stone unturned to ensure our safety and security. They simply wish to be left alone to do their jobs and given the resources to carry out their mission effectively and efficiently. But this PNM administration under Keith Christopher Rowley seems intent on emasculating the TTPS as part of its desire to control all independent institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. Put plain and simple, they wish to make the TTPS a PNM party group to carry out the bidding of Balize House. It started with the failed attempt to place the Minister of National Security as an integral part of the initial process to appoint a Commissioner of Police. Remember that? This was ruled ultra vires, the Constitution, by our courts. Next, the Prime Minister frontally intervened in the process of appointing a Commissioner of Police by ensuring that a list, presumably to appoint Gary Griffith, vanished into thin air. Next, we saw the Minister of National Security, Fitzgerald Ethelbert Hines, sitting with senior officers of the TTPS, optically giving the impression that the TTPS and this political administration were one and the same. This was followed by Keith Rowley appointing a Commissioner of Police whom he knew or ought to have known would retire in a mere matter of months. The fact that this Commissioner of Police is entitled to 3 one-year extensions at the sole discretion of the Prime Minister creates the impression that the Commissioner of Police, Earl Christopher, may operate only at the behest of the P&M administration. Last week, we saw a picture of the P&M administration seemingly giving orders to the top brass of the TTPS, an institution that is supposed to be independent, setting targets and timelines for the TTPS. What is happening in my country? That picture suggested in no uncertain terms that Keith Rowley was now in full control of the TTPS. Given this background, what is the average citizen to make of the excessive zeal and exuberance of the TTPS in dealing with the THA matter involving the Chief Secretary? What is the average citizen to make? And my colleague will be talking in more detail about that perception and that reality and that possibility. Our Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, has taken manifest steps to ensure a separation between the executive arm of the state and the TTPS. Nowhere is this more manifest than in the appointment of a Commissioner of Police, in which the Independent Police Service Commission plays a most significant role. Yet today, we have the Commissioner of Police seemingly operating at the behest of the executive because she survives at the whim and fancy of Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. Now, officers of the TTPS swear a sacred oath to uphold the Constitution and the law. They must never waver or seem to move away from that sacred requirement. I recall years ago when the UNC was in government, we held a function, I think, to mark the opening of the St. Madeleine police station. Police officers refused then to become involved in anything that would give the impression that they were supporting the UNC political administration. They did not even want to want their pictures shown close to ministers at the time. Now, I understood then what the top brass of the TTPS was saying. Now, we call today for that same arm's length relationship between the TTPS and the P&M political directorate. Too often, we see pictures of senior police officers appearing as props for photo opportunities with P&M politicians. This practice must stop immediately. At the same time, we call for even-handedness in police investigations, especially where investigations concern politicians. All, now get us clearly, all who break the law must be investigated. Whether P&M, whether UNC, whether NTA, or whatever, all must be investigated. Too often, we get the impression that P&M officials are exempt from TTPS investigations. Let me repeat. Too often, we get the impression that P&M officials are exempt from TTPS investigations. We compare the zeal with which they investigated Emailgate with absolutely nothing done against Daryl Smith, allegedly involved in a major scandal involving hush monies. Nothing on the Prime Minister sitting next to an alleged brothel owner. Nothing at all. No investigation. That is clean as far as the TTPS is concerned. Nothing on pointed questions regarding the financing of Balize House. How could the P&M raise in this guava season upwards of $100 million by barbecues, raffles, tea parties, and selling chili baby, sugar cakes, and tulum? Is money laundering involved in Balize House? Are inflated state contracts part of a deal? We ask the question. Is the TTPS not even asking a question about the donors list? Not a question. The TTPS seems most keen to investigate UNC MPs on human trafficking, but they seem not brave enough to call in the PNM to discuss allegations of Dr. Rowley's closeness to a brothel owner, at whose business undocumented Spanish-speaking women and children were detained by the TTPS. Absolute radio silence from the TTPS on investigations into who was the senior government official who authorized the operations regarding the kidnapping of Brent Thomas. That person may very well be guilty of misbehavior in public affairs. Why no TTPS investigation into allegations of Camille Ray Robinson Regis, as yet unexplained $143,000? Is this not possibly misbehavior in public office? No investigations into the Prime Minister intercepting the Commissioner of Police list. The TTPS has a duty to do right by all manner of men, whether they be UNC, whether they be PNM, whether they be NTA, or whoever. The PNM is totally seized. They're preoccupied on winning back the 2 seats in Tobago. That is their only hope in 2025, because we'll beat them in Trinidad. That is their sole mission. And that is what they must achieve to have a chance to win the 2025 general elections. I say to senior TTPS officers who may feel that duty to PNM comes before duty to your oath and to your country, do not be enticed by blandishments that you will be promoted if you serve the will of the PNM. The TTPS must not, under any circumstances, appear to be part of the PNM mission. In the United States, the prosecutorial arm of the state arms of the state have strict unwritten rules regarding public disclosures regarding politicians involved in elections. And I read, and this is from the Conversations, a newsletter at the United States, and I quote, "This goal of political neutrality appears to be adhered to by Attorney General Merrick Garland and FBI Director Christopher Wray. Both have largely refrained from making public comments on ongoing federal and state probes into possible crimes that Trump may have committed during his time at the White House, including on his alleged role in the January 6, 2021 assault on the Capitol." The TTPS may need to examine the FBI guidelines to see if they have relevance to our situation. The PNM will go to any lengths to win an election. Look at the attacks in the past against Satnarayan Sharma, Basdev Pandey, Fimba Ganga, and with respect to email gate, our political leader Kamla Prasad Bisasan and Ram Logan, all who have been exonerated in respect of the investigations. Email gate, looking beyond the four square of the evidence and all that nonsense. But the PNM are not interested in acting responsibly or making factual allegations. They are interested in character assassinations. Bringing you before the court, you will win in 10 years' time. In 10 years' time, you'll win. But you live 10 years under a cloud of impropriety and illegality. That is the PNM style. They're not interested in winning the case. They're interested in arresting you and a picture of Rodney Charles with 2 handcuffs, and that serves their purpose. And it happened with PASU office in the run-up to the 2021 elections. I saw a picture of myself in the Express front page, and people had to come and talk and say, Charles, what have you done wrong? And I did nothing wrong. Those were allegations of voter padding. Not one person has been convicted for any of those charges. But they embarrassed the UNC at the time. Today, we witness almost every so-called independent institution being subverted by the PNM. Our independent senators, the presidency, our independent service commissions, our trade unions. You think under the old President General that they could, Evan McLeod, or they could have closed down petrol trade? The IRO, no rising from their slumber, giving governments encroachments in the Concord Act, all the time sleeping. No! They have arisen from their slumber. Our Calypsonians, who used to be the bulwark of the small man holding the governments to account, they are now singing for their supper on the altar of mendicancy. Shameful, our Calypsonians singing the Prime Minister is the greatest, the PNM is the greatest. That is all you hear from the PNM. So much that nobody goes to the tents anymore. Even our fourth estate is now waking up to the descent into autocracy and dictatorship before our eyes. We have said it before, and we say it again, that the only institutions standing between democracy and dictatorship in Trinidad and Tobago are the UNC, led by Kamala Persad-Bissessar, and the Privy Council. We would dearly like to include the TTPS in this elite grouping of those who stand for democracy and against the PNM encroachment on independent institutions. Can we, TTPS, can we depend on you in this time of need? If our independent Senate bench last evening allowed the watered-down procurement bill to pass into law, then we are left with no other choice but to look to the truly independent Privy Council for deliverance. After so many years of independence, we have to look to the Privy Council for deliverance, because all our independent guardrails have fallen by the wayside and have been contaminated and subdued by Dr. the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley. So we say over to the Privy Council. Brothers and sisters, I hand you over to my esteemed colleague, MP Dennis Rambally.
Thank you, MP Rodney Charles. Ladies and gentlemen, having listened to the contribution of a very senior parliamentarian, a very conservative, mostly conservative, when it comes in the politics in terms of how it is, we approach issues. I know MP Rodney Charles does not make his statements lightly. So MP, I want to thank you for your contribution, and I ask all citizens to pay attention to the very said matters which you have pointed out, which you have reminded us of, and which points to a derailing of our democracy, a degradation of our constitutional norms. And so I thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, following on from MP Rodney Charles, I want to quickly treat with this matter of Prime Minister Rowley and his handling or his treatment or his intervention at times as Prime Minister in the matters involving the Tobago House of Assembly and the welfare of Tobagonians. I want to tell you, and I want to repeat former Prime Minister Patrick Manning, when he referred to it would have been a cabinet colleague of his, none other than Prime Minister Rowley, when he described Dr. Rowley's behavior. What we saw yesterday reminded me of the words of Prime Minister Manning. Dr. Rowley, when we saw his press conference yesterday, which lasted about an hour, what we saw was hate, ladies and gentlemen. What we saw was bitterness. What we saw was acrimony. And what we see in the manner in which he's conducted himself is animosity. We saw a Prime Minister who is a man totally completely out of control. We saw a man who, when he is opposed, when he does not have his political way, that he will go to all extremes and stop at no lengths to ensure that he has his political way. And I want to say at the outset, alongside MP Rodney Charles, that I want to send this message particularly, it is to all of Trinidad and Tobago, because we are all one people, but particularly to Tobagonians. Apart from the golf course in Magdalena, Prime Minister Rowley has no care or concern for Tobago. He has absolutely none. And we will display why we say that. And you see, ladies and gentlemen, one must look at the history of how we have ended up here. And I'm not talking about going back to the 1970s and the 1980s and 1990s. I'm talking about 2020 coming forward. And what we have seen, and ladies and gentlemen, you remember that we would have had the THA elections in January 2021, 25th of January 2021. What happened, ladies and gentlemen? You had the THA elections and you had a tie between the PDP and the PNM, 6 districts each. So the PDP got 6 seats and you had the PNM having 6 seats. And it was from that point in time that you saw the Prime Minister, the Rowley-led PNM government, taking a certain stance against Tobago. And what did he do? When we pointed out, when the commentators, when the political analysts, when us, particularly Mrs. Prasad Bisessa, my colleague MP Rodney Charles, myself, lawyers in the UNC, when we pointed out in the parliament that there was already an established norm, a constitutional interpretation that we could ascribe to the situation, which would have dealt with the situation, to have a breaking of that tie, that 6-6 tie, and that we could have had a functioning THA, Prime Minister Rowley refused to listen. So they were stunned at their lack of a definitive victory. They thought 18 to 19 years of PNM rule in Tobago, THA, they thought that they would have just continued that rule. And they were stunned, they were shocked, because the people of Tobago sent one of the clearest signals to them that this is not what we want for the people of Tobago anymore. We do not want a PNM-led THA. And so what the people were saying was that it was a potent and telling expression of the will of the people of Tobago. And you see, that is the difference between political parties and this Rowley-led PNM. That difference being that whereas us in the UNC, we will respect, we will support, albeit we will hold them accountable as well, because we are all accountable to the people. But as a political party, we will respect Tobagonians, we will respect the parties in Tobago, and we will respect the will of the people. Here it is, you have Prime Minister Rowley doing the exact opposite. And that is the difference, ladies and gentlemen. He treated that whole 6-6 tie as practically being insurmountable. He treated that as though it necessitated parliamentary intervention. And what did he do? He and his cabinet brought a bill to the parliament to increase the amount of seats from 12 to 15. Even when we pointed out that with 15 you can have difficulties with that in future. According to you, it's a tie and you don't want to respect that the standing orders of the THA make provision for how you can break the tie by having recourse to the standing orders of the House of Representatives. And we pointed out all of those things. He still went ahead and he increased the amount of seats to 15. And what happened then? What happened when you had the follow-up THA elections? You had 14-1, a landslide victory. And the people of Tobago told Dr. Rowley and the PNM-led THA at that time, those who were vying for the THA, that we don't want you now to run the THA anymore. We want to give the PDP, we want to give all of those candidates who went forward a chance. And what has happened? What has happened? 14-1. And Prime Minister Rowley does not respect that. He does not respect the will of the people of Tobago. And this is shown when we look at what has taken place with the THA. Dr. Rowley is not prepared as the Prime Minister and the head of the central government. he is not prepared to respect that the THA is an autonomous institution and that they have their own rights. They can legislate for certain things. They want to run Tobago in a manner where they can make Tobago and Trinidad feel proud. And here it is, you have a mandate given to young Chief Secretary Augustine Farley, and you have others, Miss Faith B. Israel and others, that they will now have a chance to run Tobago the way Tobagonians want Tobago to be run. But Dr. Rowley does not respect that because he has lost all control of Tobago. And this is what we are seeing here. What happened, and I will return to this self-governance and self-autonomy issue in a little while. But I want to say that what you had, which precipitated us coming here today, is that you had on Wednesday that the Chief Secretary of the THA, Mr. Farley, he went to the Tobago House of Assembly and he gave a statement in that parliament. That is the Tobago Parliament. That assembly is the parliament of the people of Tobago. It belongs to them. So he went there and he made certain statements which points to the possible commission of criminal offenses. It points to the possible conspiracy amongst high officials spanning from members of the government, central government, to high-ranking members in the TTPS. And that is something that we have to all be aware of. It is not the first time that we have seen or heard of this kind of conduct. And this is what MP Charles was referring to when he spoke about those illustrations, right? Emailgate, and you know, we had this situation with former Chief Justice Sat Sharma. So what you saw was that Mr. Farley went and he spoke in the parliament to treat with a situation. And what did we say to that? We said that, you know, you have a situation where the TTPS obtained warrants to go and search the homes and to seize devices of none other than Mr. Farley himself and other officials of the THA, the Deputy Chief Secretary and others. Imagine the police has gone to do that, and that is arising out of the fact that there is some videotape which recorded a particular conversation. And mind you, whilst the information in the public domain remains that that videotape has revealed the commission of no offense, no criminal offense. It points to the commission of no criminal offense, no breaking of the law by anyone. Yet you have the police rushing with haste to issue warrants against elected members of the Tobago House of Assembly. You tell me, where is the respect for the people of Tobago? Where is that respect? So what was our position? Both MP Rodney Charles and myself, led by Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, of course, we having our respective portfolios to shadow, we immediately commented on what Mr. Farley spoke to in that parliament. And basically, we pointed out the fact that you had, this was on Wednesday, that you had a situation where the police, not treating with home invasions, which is on the rise, not treating with an unprecedented murder rate, which broke all records in 2022, right? And being the highest number of serious crimes and homicides. And in 2023 for the year, so far we have already surpassed what we had last year, the record breaking that we had last year in terms of criminal statistics. And so we pointed to the fact that, well, how is the TTPS so much engaged in issuing these warrants there, arising out of the commission of no offense, or even the potential commission of an offense? How is it you end up in the THA and you're going into people's homes when whatever video you feel, you know, was recorded and you want to investigate that, it does not point to the commission of an offense? And so you had the statements of Chief Secretary Farley pointing to obtaining a statement. This is a direct statement from the Chief Secretary that he spoke to someone, and that someone who he spoke about and said it may be a whistleblower, Mr. Akil Abdullah, made certain statements which pointed to the commission potential commission of egregious criminal offenses. That is what he pointed to. And that is where we said, wait a minute. If what Mr. Akil Chambers is saying is true, then it points to a serious conspiracy to commit serious crimes, perverting the course of justice, rank corruption. It is speaking to the fact that you can have even offenses such as misconduct in public office, right? Perjuring oneself, bribing a witness, a potential witness. And so these are matters which we said we need investigation. But that was the position that we would think that everyone would want, because we want the truth to come out at the forefront. But not Dr. Rowley. Not Dr. Rowley. Dr. Rowley went on a tirade yesterday and ranting and raving yesterday. He went on the full frontal attack on Chief Secretary Farley Augustine. And so when he attacked Farley Augustine yesterday, you know what was the number one attack of Mr. Farley Augustine? That he, Dr. Rowley, is seeking advice from his Attorney General. So he is using the central government. He is using a senior cabinet member who should be looking after the welfare of not only Trinidadians but Tobagonians as well, taking him out of that job that he has, that high onus and responsibility that he has, to advise him, Rowley, about what criminal action he can launch against the Chief Secretary. Can you imagine that is what he is using the Attorney General to do? Hire your own lawyer. Get your own personal lawyer. Are you short of lawyers, or are you short of lawyers who making any sense these days? Or according to Chief Secretary Farley Augustine, is it that your lawyers who you depend on are somehow involved, or they are implicated potentially in the commission of offenses as told in those statements? What is happening, Dr. Rowley? Don't use Mr. Amor. He belongs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and he's not your personal lawyer. So having said that, what he wants Amor to do? He wants Amor to investigate, to analyze, and to give him advice as to how he can launch proceedings against Farley Augustine for what he said in the THA. Now, if ever there was disrespect from a member of central government, the Prime Minister, towards the people of Tobago, that was disrespect yesterday, MP Rodney Charles.
Correct.
Ladies and gentlemen, imagine Tobagonians between the period of 2020 to 2022 last year, that they were clamoring, they wanted their views to be heard in ongoing discussions concerning self-governance of Tobago and self-autonomy for the THA. And they were speaking. Do you know why that fell apart? Don't let PNM fool anybody and say that is because the opposition objected, you know. Far from. We put our position as the United National Congress and the loyal opposition on record in writing from very early in the day that if you are going to propose amendments in the central government parliament, in the Trinidad Parliament, you need to make sure you express the will of what the Tobagonians want. And because they had not done that, not that I am saying it to Rodney Charles or Mrs. Prasad Bisessa, Mr. Ho-Choy Charles said that it was not properly reflective of what Tobagonians wanted. You had other persons, Dr. Vanas James and others, and even at that point in time, Mr. Farley Augustine was one of those, and other members of his party, that they were expressing the views that, listen, what was being brought to the parliament did not reflect what Tobagonians were asking for. And that was our position. So the bills that came to the parliament didn't fall because we didn't support it. It fell because it did not reflect the will of the people of Tobago. And I want to ask the people of Tobago and Trinidad, but particularly Tobago, do you think you will ever see the light of day for increased self-autonomy and self-governance under this government? You will never see it. Because what we saw yesterday, imagine Dr. Rowley, who enjoys freedom of speech, absolute freedom of speech in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, went to the Parliament, made a statement which basically called out Farley Augustine as the THA head. But when Farley Augustine does it on behalf of the people of Tobago in the Assembly, Dr. Rowley wants to now find a way to go after him, wants to see whether not so that criminal offenses could be launched against Farley Augustine. Imagine that. So if Dr. Rowley does not have respect for the THA, when it is the THA was 6-6, and he didn't want to respect that the standing orders put forward a procedure which could be adopted then, and yesterday you saw it again, where he does not respect the sanctity of the Tobago House of Assembly, because he does not want them to have their autonomy. He does not want them to speak freely in their parliament, because it is not favorable to him. Do you think you will see self-autonomy and self-governance? You see, it is really a modus operandi by Dr. Rowley as Prime Minister. And I know what they will say, they will come and say, Rodney, Charles and Rambally, you all have no authority to speak on this matter because we didn't fight the elections in Tobago. But I repeat, when we speak on behalf of all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And we respect the people of Tobago, we respect political parties of Tobago. And we are of the view that they are very well capable of running their own affairs in Tobago at the THA level. So getting back to this, that is what people of Tobago are faced with. I was so shocked that a Prime Minister could be making that kind of statements. I had to go back, and this is my personal copy, Rodney Charles. These are my personal copies before Prime Minister Rowley wants to belittle us, say we run down by the Parliament and take the people's books from the library. These are my personal copies, and this is Erskine May Parliamentary Practice. This is the latest edition. I had to go back into this to see what privileges and what immunities they enjoy, right? When you have these type of entities that have been established. Dr. Rowley would want you to believe that because the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, that is housed here in the Red House, is catered for in the Constitution, that somehow we enjoy the absolute privilege now to speak freely, but not the people of Tobago, because the people of Tobago are governed by a THA Act. So that just because of that so-called distinction that you have made, which is false, that is not a proper distinction to be made. But he wants people of Tobago to not enjoy the same equivalent terms and conditions and benefits and immunities that we enjoy in our parliament. So it shows the hypocrisy of Dr. Rowley. And when I looked at it, this immunity that you have in people's representative bodies, it goes back all the way to the Bill of Rights of 1689. Article 9, Bill of Rights 1689 confers on proceedings in Parliament protection from being impeached or questioned in any court or place out of the Parliament. And there's a reason why they use that language. So, not to say that if you pass a law that the law cannot be challenged in the courts, but what you say in the Parliament, subject to the standing orders of the particular institution, you are free to say it. And I couldn't imagine that in this day and age, this is what we have to be battling. A Prime Minister coming to tell people of Tobago, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago telling the people of Tobago, here what's going on. You can't talk so free in all your parts. That is all the parliament, but they can't talk like how we just talk here in the Red House. That is just legalizing insanity. That is craziness. And when you look at this is the other one. So that was Parliament Functions, Practice and Procedures. I had to go back to all my books. I couldn't bring the Lok Sabha, which I also had refuge to.
India.
Right? The Parliament of India. And so I looked at that as well. But this one I brought. And it is at page 127. And Dr. Rowley was even attacking the presiding officer. He was even saying the presiding officer was wrong to do what she did. And here it is, you have this ancient right of a house to regulate its own proceedings. This means that it is not only the content of speeches which cannot be called in question in the courts, but the very decision of the house itself, either in the process of passing legislation or on other matters. The house is solely responsible for deciding its own procedure, with minor exceptions where procedures are embodied in statute, and is solely responsible for adjudicating on them in case of dispute and for their enforcement. This position has been accepted by the courts On no matter is there any appeal to the courts regarding anything that constitutes a proceeding in Parliament. The House is sovereign over its own business. But Dr. Rowley wants to take away the sovereignty of the Tobago House of Assembly, and he wants to keep it for himself because at this point in time, he's the Prime Minister and he enjoys his status in the Red House here. That is hypocrisy. That is political hypocrisy, and it is a hypocrisy of unimagined proportions. And you know, all that I have said here before, as I said, I have to go back to that. But it is as a result of those norms and those practices, and the THA itself has seen it fit to embody that in its own standing orders. So what you have is you have Section 70, and I think I saw it quoted in one of the newspapers, or maybe all of them, but I can't remember. So it was actually quoted today. I am referring now to, very quickly, the Express, where they speak about privileges and immunities in the THA Act and House of Representatives Act, and they quoted Section 70. So people are aware of it. The people are aware of it, and I refer to the papers because I don't want to read it. Just to say that Section 71 says that the rules and standing orders of the Assembly, there shall be freedom of speech in the chamber of the Assembly. What does freedom of speech mean? Freedom of speech means according to Dr. Rowley, or freedom of speech means according to the will of the people of Tobago. No civil or criminal proceedings may be instituted against any member or other person for words spoken before or written in a report of the Assembly or a committee thereof. And then it goes on 73. In other respects, the powers, privileges, and immunities of the Assembly, members and committees of the Assembly, shall be such as may from time to time be prescribed by Parliament, and until so defined, shall be those that apply to the House of Representatives and to its members and committees. So unless the Red House in Trinidad, Port of Spain, we take God out of our thoughts and we pass regulations to curtail freedom of speech in the Assembly, they enjoy the immunities and the privileges and the sovereignty that we enjoy in the House of Representatives. So, Dr. Rowley, you could take that and you could give it to Reggie Amo, and both of you could smoke it in all the respective pipes. Leave the people of Tobago alone. Serve them, yes, but leave them alone. This is madness, you know. This is just really, we're going on a pathway of really dictatorship. I want to say that I had to even go back to Shackleton. Lawyers will know this. Shackleton on the law and practices of convening meetings, and how you have to say you stand on a point of order, or you raise your hand, or how you conduct yourself when you're in a meeting in the public. Because I can understand that a Prime Minister is telling his Attorney General to investigate this. And really, there are questions that you ask when you are going before council or committee and you're making statements. And this is what is mandated upon Chief Secretary Augustine Fally Augustine. Mr. Augustine would have had to take the position when he came to that Parliament, and it seems as though he did, because when you look, I have read over what he has stated in his statement, and he would have taken into account, does he have an interest or duty to make the statement? Ladies and gentlemen, do you think that Mr. Fally Augustine had a duty, he had an interest to make that statement in the THA, in the Assembly? Is there a corresponding interest or duty on the part of Mr. Fally or other members to receive it? Do you think you as a citizen have a duty to have that information put in the highest platform or forum in the public domain, and for us to receive it? You ask yourself and answer that question. Is there an interest or duty on the part of the press and the public to receive it? And the answers to all of those questions are resounding yes. So we are not in support of Chief Secretary Fally Augustine on a personal level. We are in support of him because he holds a critical office, and we respect the fact that he has been chosen by the people of Tobago to hold that Chief Secretary position. And we are saying that we support, when you look at what are the principles embodied in public officials in bringing things into the public forum, we are saying that it's a resounding yes. He owed the people of Tobago and Trinidad that information, and he was correct in putting it out in the assembly. So having said that, I want to say that when you have a sitting prime minister who goes after a chief secretary, listen, look at this picture. Look at this picture. The raging bull himself, as detailed not by MP Charles and MP Rambally, as detailed, and it was like a premonition, something that Patrick Manning himself, former prime minister, underwent. Look at how Dr. Rowley is behaving, trying to bully his way around Tobago. It will not work, and I repeat, people of Trinidad and Tobago, unless it is the golf course in Magdalena, he has no concern for you people in Tobago. I say that. And I want to say now that having looked at the freedom which people of Tobago should enjoy in looking after their own affairs, in governing themselves through the THA, it is a sovereign democratic state that we belong to, and as part of a sovereign democratic state, that is section 1 of our Supreme Constitution. That is the constitution that we abide by as part of a sovereign democratic state. This freedom of speech that we enjoy as members of the public under section 4 of the Constitution, the freedom of speech of the press, which we enjoy both under the section 4 of the Constitution, but also as a part of section 1 sovereign democratic state, is the same. It is the same power, it is the same rights, fundamental rights that people of Tobago enjoy both inside and outside of the Tobago House of Assembly. And I can go on that, but that is enough of that for now. But it shows that Dr. Rowley does not respect the Tobago House of Assembly. He's not in control of it, so he's trying to bully his way around. And people of Tobago, you all have to stand up for yourselves. So that is in relation to that crazy affair or suggestion or bullying tactic that he will take Reginald Amor, who couldn't even remember what role he performed in proceedings, in court proceedings, which he represented people, which cost these taxpayers monies. He couldn't remember what role he performed, and put the state of Trinidad and Tobago in a conflicting position in proceedings in Miami. He himself, we have seen from time to time where he has put the country on down the pathway. He can't even run his own office properly. According to him, files going missing, and paying 800,000 or how much money it is to get a lawyer to come in, or lawyers to come in here and investigate, and they come back and say, well, you need better systems. Maybe what they should have said is, AG Amor, you need to become competent. Maybe that's what they needed to say. We don't have to pay money to say that. We have been saying that all along. So I want to move on to some of the things that were stated in that statement very quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a situation where, according to the Chief Secretary of the THA, a person came to him to say that there were conversations between himself, senior members of the cabinet, possibly even the Prime Minister himself. The Prime Minister has come out to say no, but the Prime Minister, some senior attorneys as well of the legal profession, and top-ranking members in the TTPS, that they were all part of some conspiracy to bring down the Chief Secretary. And monies were paid. I saw things about tranches of 10,000 and 10,000 and whatever else. And this whistleblower is saying that. But that having been said, I want to know that when Dr. Rowley responded yesterday about this same whistleblower, Dr. Rowley, how do you know? How is it that you as Prime Minister, you know that Mr. Akil Abdullah is a police witness? How does the Prime Minister know that? He came out clearly and says this man is a police witness. How do you, Dr. Rowley, know that? We don't know that. The police service might know it, but how do you as the Prime Minister know that Akil Abdullah is a police witness? Witness to which investigation? Witness in which matter? In the commission of which crime? And that is what is frightening. How is he running this National Security Council? Is it for the benefit of the country? It can't be, because crime is out of control for some years now, 2015 coming forward now, and it has really reached an alarming rate. But it seems as though when he speaks about these things, he is talking about knowledge which he has gained as head of the National Security Council. And these are matters which are frightening, ladies and gentlemen. How is it that the Prime Minister Rowley, can say that the police in Tobago are working closely with that witness? How do you know that? How does the Prime Minister Rowley know that Akil Abdullah is working closely with that? Akil Abdullah is working closely with the TTPS in ongoing investigations. I don't know where is he getting that from. And then we see all of a sudden Sunday gone talking about vetting units. Is it that you already have a vetting unit in place? You have an internal police unit in conjunction with the National Security Council, and that you are in operational command of the Anti-Corruption Bureau, and this vetting unit is a vetting unit that we are soon to learn about. The FBI told you to set up a vetting unit so you could go after Secretary Farley Augustine. Is that what is going on here? So I want to know that we have a situation which points to a total erosion of the separation of powers, a total lack of respect for the THA and its elected officials, and we have a situation where you have a Prime Minister who is bullying his way around the town, so to speak, trying to get his political way, and that is frightening for any democracy, let alone Trinidad and Tobago. I want to repeat some of these questions because when I heard the statement of Chief Secretary Farley Augustine, what did he say? He asked these questions based on the factual premise that we have tried to just highlight very quickly. He said, moreover, I have some questions to ask. Is this gentleman the complainant or one of the complainants in this matter? Did Inspector Weaver Ali sit in the same room with the Prime Minister to discuss this matter? I am asking the questions. These are matters which will have to be answered by the TTPS, and it cannot be answered by Earl Christopher, and I'll tell you why in a moment. MP Rodney Charles has already pointed to certain facts and circumstances, but we are saying it has to be an independent investigation. Did the Commissioner of Police take a directive from the Prime Minister on this matter? Is the Prime Minister a part of or aware that bribery formed part of the inducements to trump up this case? Did the Prime Minister have his personal lawyer intervene in this matter in one way or the other? Did Inspector Weaver Ali sit in the same room with the claimant and the now irrelevant political leader of the PNM Tobago Council and took advice? Madam Presiding Officer, these are serious matters, so serious that it requires an independent inquiry. And he asked the questions, will the phones and devices of Inspector Ali and the Prime Minister and the Commissioner of Police and Mr. Dennis and Mr. Abdullah and Chad Band and Warner be seized, and who will do the seizure? Well, I want to tell Chief Secretary Farley Augustine that we certainly support an independent investigation or inquiry into these matters, but we want to give you a little piece of advice. It's not legal advice, it's just humane advice. Don't hold your breath with this when you ask these questions. Who will seize the phones? Because on my way to this press conference, I was having a discussion with Senator David Nakid. And you all recalled what happened with that Vincent Nelson indemnity affair and the facts and matters surrounding Vincent Nelson indemnity gate pointed to the potential commission of offences, perverting the course of justice, corruption, misconduct in public office, all of these matters. And since 9th of November 2022, this is the date I'm seeing here, Senator David Nakid wrote a letter, and Senator Nakid and myself delivered this letter in person to the then, 2022, to the then Commissioner of Police. And when we delivered it to the Commissioner of Police, we also met with Miss Erla Herwood Christopher. We met with her as well when we delivered this letter, and we were given the assurance that they were already in the process of taking advice from the Director of Public Prosecutions, and that this matter was being investigated and we would hear something about it. And months later, we hear nothing about it. But the police service, maybe through the certain vetted units, they are moving with haste in Tobago, and they are seizing devices and they are raiding people's homes and doing what they will according to certain politicians. I say that without fear of contradiction because it speaks for itself. The timeline of how certain investigations are somehow put on the front burner and others are put on a back burner or probably taken off the stove altogether, and it is just shelved somewhere. We are seeing something here, ladies and gentlemen, which does not bode well for our democracy. And the last thing I want to touch on is when I heard MP Charles speak about the police service, and you had situations with voter pardon. You had a situation where you had certain police officers or departments of the police, TTPS, who went after citizens on charges of voter pardon and saying that these people, they were known supporters of the United National Congress. These people had voted, and then you had all of these people being dragged down to courthouses in handcuffs as though they had committed a crime. They had lied about where they lived. They went and voted where they shouldn't vote, and all of these things. And not one of those charges could have been substantiated. Not one could have been substantiated. We had a situation where you mentioned former Chief Justice Satnarayan Sharma. What has happened? You had police officers who were there like he was a criminal who had just slashed off somebody's neck and gone home and was relaxing. And these police officers just converged there as though he had committed some egregious crime. And when you look at the facts of it, it is very telling. How did the police find themselves in that? And I want to say that brings me to this. Now I want to make it abundantly clear as I conclude on this particular point. I refer to today's Newsday, but I want to make it abundantly clear to the Newsday media house and to all media houses that we are not attacking any media house or the freedom of the press or the media. We are not attacking the Newsday. But what is embodied here as an editorial, these are matters which we must address. Because you see, it points to taking down Trinidad and Tobago, a part of, I want to say, dictatorship, totalitarianism, authoritarianism, all of these things. This Newsday editorial today does not do justice to our democracy. So as I said I'd make it abundantly clear. The title of it is When Policing Politics Collide. That we are not attacking the Newsday, but we are duty bound to point out the dangers associated with the message of this particular editorial. And this is the editorial, as I say, what you have when policing politics collide. And I say this because you see this Newsday editorial, it is a remarkable insight into the political palette. This particular, what it embodies here, this intellectual codification of opinion in this editorial, it really is a remarkable insight into the political palette of the PNM apologist. It is a feast of ignorance, hasty, half-informed arguments, flawed policy prescriptions, and a dangerous lack of knowledge about how politics and society and the newspapers work. And ladies and gentlemen, why do I say that? What does it say? It says that you should have some form of censorship of politicians, of commentators, when you see we are talking about the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, especially during an election campaign. If during an election campaign you have a police service or you have a vetted unit coming after political opponents, right? Because we are all sparring off against each other in politics, and we see that is taking place. If we are duty bound to point out these things, confronted with the reality control, its usurpation of the Police Service Commission, the infamous merit list, the deposing of qualified and unqualified candidates for commissioner. These are all in the public record. You then have this editorial. It decides that the opposition is also able to politicize the police. What is that about? All of a sudden saying that you have a situation where we shouldn't say anything about the police service. Newsday, today's editorial, manages to squeeze 3 pieces of dishonesty into one word, and that is politicization. I don't know since when politicians must not speak of politics, right? So that is what I say. It is dishonest, it is intellectually dishonest to say that this politicization is something that is wrong. First, I want to point out for the record, the UNC has no control over the police, in and out of the government. Unlike the PNM, we are guided by the Constitution, which separates government from police. And further, it is obvious that the eagerness to align with the PNM in all matters displayed by the TTPS hierarchy is not extended to the UNC. So all that MP Charles has spoken about today and what I have also mentioned, when they are very rushed to align themselves with the hierarchy, that is not extended to the UNC. Never has, and I doubt never will, because that is not how we operate as a political party. And finally, the UNC pointing out the many deficiencies of the TTPS, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, whether it be the Commissioner of Police, whether it be a unit within, whether we do a generalization talking about the entire service. When we point out the many deficiencies in the TTPS, it is not politicization. It is the UNC doing its job. It is the role of the opposition to do these things. So all this in the first two lines of the editorial. But the real enormity that I have issue with MP Charles is the second paragraph of the Newsday, when it goes on to call, and this is where I have serious disagreement with. The Newsday editorial goes on to call in the second paragraph for a legally binding code of conduct explicitly banning politicians from scandalizing the police. This is a newspaper editorial asking for censorship of freedom of speech. That is what that editorial is doing, censoring freedom of speech. And I want to say that the prescription is nothing short of insanity, given the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service habit of blatantly ignoring revelations of its own corruption and incompetence and carrying on without regard for protest. So I want to say that today, I repeat, it is not an attack on the newspaper, but that editorial that they have proposed, the rules that they are speaking to, would lead to the creation of what we say in the English legal tradition is called a star chamber, an oppressive institution shielded from public scrutiny. You just had on Wednesday an elected member winning 14-1 in the seats in Tobago, coming to the assembly and speaking about some serious revelations of conspiracy with members, senior members of the TTPS. And you have a prime minister who comes yesterday and says otherwise, and we are looking on at this, and today you are talking about we must not have any kind of full freedom to criticize the actions of the police. How do you think that matters find itself in the newspapers to start with for you to report? It is because you have whistleblowers, you have politicians, you have brave politicians who will come out and act in the interest of the people. So if there were any doubt about what is this editorial's political agenda, it is what is not in the editorial and which evidently must be driving it. The recent search and seizure of documents and data carried out by the TTPS on THA officials. The THA Chief Secretary Farley Augustine blamed this on the PNM's influence on the TTPS, which the Prime Minister has denied. And that is all fine and good up to this point in time. But don't say we have to have a code of conduct which tells us we can't criticize the TTPS. So I want to say that in conclusion, the editorial's confection of illogic, opaque reasoning, self-censorship, and absurd policy prescription is what we would say Orwellian. It is Orwellian. In his famous novel about social and political corruption by a malevolent government, George Orwell called the purveyor of the most grievous lies the Ministry of Truth. By this logic, that editorial runs the risk of making that newspaper change its name from Newsday to Newsnight, darkness passing itself off as daylight. Ladies and gentlemen, I had to put that on the record because it is very easy to say that it is members of the opposition who are the ones who are criticizing the TTPS. And that is not so. We will speak to where we see excesses. We will speak to where we see corruption, potential collusion. We will speak to incompetence because we are certainly not comfortable with the state of play where you can have last year recorded, last year was the record setting, where you had some 302 murders to date, and this year we are already set to break the record, where we have 320 murders. And we are talking about home invasions, we are talking about serious crimes just going on without any abatement. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will take questions from the media if there are any questions. And MP Charles and I, we stand ready to answer some of these questions.
We have some questions online, MP. MP Rambally, the Prime Minister Rodney yesterday appeared to imply that an incorrect procedure was followed by Tobago House of Assembly. And that's perhaps why he's calling into question whether or not the rule of privileges apply. What do you respond to that?
Well, again, is Dr. Rowley in a position to say an incorrect procedure was followed? The Tobago House of Assembly is sovereign in terms of their own practice and procedures in that house. So if the presiding officer, and that is where I went back outside of Section 70 of the standing orders of the THA Assembly, which deals with privileges and immunities, that's why I went and checked what it is you have as principles embodying free speech and supporting how these institutions are to be run. Unless we are prepared to accept the proposition from Dr. Rowley that somehow the THA enjoys a lesser privilege and immunity than we enjoy here in the Red House in this Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, that what Dr. Rowley is saying is it must be preposterous. It is illogical. It is plainly wrong. They can govern their own procedures. So I don't agree with his statement that they followed the wrong procedure.
And Charles, do you think that the TPS is equipped and is able to handle investigations onto itself?
I think, based on what we read about police investigations in terms of the use of technology, that there is something missing. We recall we have an SSA. Over the past 8 years, over $1 billion has been spent on this SSA to provide intelligence to the TTPS. And we read recently about murders, hits being called from inside the prison service, inside the prison offices, the prisons. How is it? How is it that prisoners could call it outside, and you have an expensive Israeli trained intelligence gathering agency with remote military grade interceptors not able to identify who gave the message, who are the persons receiving it, what actions they're going to take, and have a sting operation dealing with that? How are we to operate when you have a Coast Guard? The Prime Minister went on BIVAPS, bought 2 Australian vessels, $600 million, no procurement, and within 2 years, the shaft and propeller, one of them, was totally destroyed. How it is? I mean, I have a car for 5 years, and there's no a cheap RAV4. Up to today, I have no major repairs on that car. You bought 2 expensive vessels, and one had to go to the Dominican Republic. I understand they had to spend 10 million US to repair the shaft and propeller. Something is wrong. Either they're not using the intelligence, or they have the intelligence and they're deliberately using it only for political achievement of political goals and not to reduce crime in Trinidad and Tobago. So the short answer is no. I do not believe that they're equipped.
MP Rambally, we know that Officer Wendell Lucas is the officer in charge of investigating Chief Secretary Fowler. This is also the officer who is in charge of investigating the opposition's own Chief Whip, MP David Lee. The opposition has raised concerns in the past that Mr. Lucas has had his leave pulled out by the government in disregard to the agreed CPO policy. Do you think that this raises concerns that Mr. Lucas may be involved in questionable
Uh,
activities in government?
I am glad that that question has been raised because coincidentally, I am the person who raised that question in a previous press conference because the information that came to hand at the point in time was that this particular person, Wendell Lucas, and he seems to be head of police's white collar crime division, ACP Wendell Lucas. And I'm reading an article here as well where they cite him as being presiding over certain investigations. The question which I raised, and this is maybe more than a year, I'm not too sure, but I raised it sometime back in one of these said press conferences. Was Officer Wendell Lucas paid out for his leave over and above other persons? Because there was a policy, if I remember correctly, that was passed that they were not going to pay out people's leave and they were not even going to give leave at some point in time to officers. They wanted all boots on the ground. One, was he an officer who was paid out leave in an expedited manner? And if he was, why was that done? In what circumstances was he selected and paid out his leave? And we want to get clear timelines. I asked this before. I hope the media carries it this time. When was he paid out? Because we need to see exactly when he was paid out for his leave in an expedited manner, how much, and exactly when were the charges laid against our Chief Whip, Dr. David Lee. Because we do have concerns. We are not casting aspersions. If the TTPS comes clear with that kind of information, it will be something that the public will know with surety that something is not amidst. But here it is, we have a situation where we are seeing that his name is popping up again and again. And according to our information, it seems as though he was paid out his full leave, whatever leave he had inside, vacation and otherwise, in an expedited manner. ACP Wendell Lucas. So I repeat that we do have concerns about his role in these investigations amidst a background where we are hearing that he was somehow paid out over and above other officers in an expedited manner for whatever leave he had inside.
You mentioned that the Prime Minister has asked the Attorney General to investigate whether or not Mr. Farley's actions were legal or not. Given that the examples you cited in the THA Act, how long do you think the Attorney General should take before he makes a statement on this matter?
Well, number one, I repeat, the Attorney General should not be going down that wild goose chase and even entertaining such a stupid, ridiculous instruction from the Prime Minister. The AG should get down to doing some serious work. That is number one. But number two, I really would not want to put any timeline on that instruction. If Dr. Rowley feels that he has somehow been defamed, and as I say, I don't agree with that, he should instruct his own personal lawyer. So I'm not about finding out when and how and suggesting when AG Armour should get back to Dr. Rowley on those matters. The AG should do his work. Dr. Rowley, if he feels he has somehow been implicated in anything, incriminated in anything, and he feels that it is somehow actionable, take your personal lawyers at your own personal expense, instruct them and get your advice.
And Charles, responding to the Chief Secretary's allegations, the Commissioner of Police denied all involvement in any conspiracy, but she did not say whether or not an investigation into the statements made by Mr. Abdullah was conducted or not. Do you think that one should happen?
Well, I think as somebody who has been implicated, she ought to come clean with all the information relevant to this matter. And therefore, I wouldn't want to get into what she ought to do or not do. I think she's a senior person. She's been implicated and she has to do. My friend was saying she has to get her legal advice and do what is necessary in the circumstances. I do not know if you wish to.
Yes, and I want to repeat something that we said already, which is when we spoke about this Dr. Rowley PNM's unleashing the reign of terror on the democratically elected THA. You see, we are not saying these things, haphazard, or as we like to say in common parlance, scatter shots, right? We are basing it based on what we are seeing coming out in the public domain. In the immediate recent past, we are talking about what a chief secretary, not an ordinary person, the chief secretary of the THA, and what he has said points to some serious issues of potential collusion, corruption, bribery, criminal offenses, perverting the course of justice. And against that backdrop, where you have someone who, coincidentally, now we know Dr. Rowley, he knows that Akil Abdullah is a witness in something. We didn't know that. I don't think Chief Secretary knew that because he didn't say that in his statement. But Dr. Rowley knows that. I want to call again, I want to repeat the call on Commissioner of Police, Earl Hereward Christopher, to immediately stop the TTPS being used to conduct this reign of terror. You see all them, those procurement, obtaining and procuring warrants to go in people's homes in the THA. I wanted to stop that. What we need now is an independent investigation. What she can do as Commissioner of Police is she can put forward a proposal which can be considered by the Parliament as to, when I say Parliament, all of us, as to what she thinks are the right steps in terms of moving forward with an independent investigation. One must not forget, you know, we call out some, but even I want to say a non-UNC example, right, is Brent Thomas. Up till now, we don't have the answers which we seek. How is it that people could charter this regional CARICOM plane and go there and pick up one of our own citizens, put him in a cage, handcuffs, and bring him back to Trinidad, and we are not getting the answers? What we are seeing, though, is that you are seeing operatives within the TTPS who are acting in a manner, and it seems to be that they are acting in a law unto themselves. So unless the government is saying that you have total rogue elements in the TTPS, and they are conceding they are not in control of the TTPS by way of oversight, it means that they are getting authorization from somebody very high in the hierarchy. Those things don't happen just by a reporting officer, a sergeant, or a constable, or somebody telling them, look, we have to go over to Barbados and bring back Brent Thomas. What we are seeing here is really erosion of democratic norms as to how our institutions should be run. So Earl Christopher is no different. What we have seen traditionally is that she has aligned herself heavily under the hand of this government.
Those are all the questions,
So, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, let me thank all of you for joining us in this press conference. We will have our next press conference, of course, on Sunday morning. That is our traditional weekly presser. Today was our midweek, albeit we held it today Friday because we had Parliament on Wednesday and we had other matters taking place. What you are seeing is that you have an opposition led by Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. We are ensuring in the people's interest as an opposition that we are prepared to defend people's rights. We are prepared to hold the government accountable in terms of how they are spending your taxpayer dollars. We are certainly prepared to go mano a mano with Dr. Rowley and his gang that are seeking to run this country down to the ground. We are prepared to do whatever it takes. I know that they will come after Rodney Charles and myself, but we are prepared to do what we have to do in the interest of the people. And this is why we respect the position taken by the Chief Secretary, Farley Augustine, of the Tobago House of Assembly. We are not in political partnership with him. We didn't support him when they had Tobago House of Assembly elections. We respected the position which you had a group of individuals coming together to participate in the politics, to participate because they desire to run the affairs of Tobago through the Tobago House of Assembly, and we still respect that fact. And now that you see a Prime Minister, a sitting Prime Minister, going after him in this kind of vindictive manner because Farley Augustine is not doing what his Chief Secretary and his other members of that THA to stand your ground. You have been elected democratically by the people of Tobago. You all have to do your job, and we will respect that. And as much as we see that we have to stand and to speak out on these issues, We will continue to do that because as opposition, we stand in the defense of people of Tobago as well as people of Trinidad. So MP Rodney Charles, thank you so very much for your presence today. I thank all of you, and of course on behalf of the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, we wish you all the best today, Friday, and a beautiful weekend ahead. Thank you.